Good morning, or good afternoon. Hey guys, and I apologize so much for the audio on the last attempt for this fungi video. This time I'm going to try something new. I actually went ahead and took the headset that I'm using with my other computer and trying to see if I can use the mic on that for this one. Typically the headset mic does not want to link up to the audio very well on my other computer, but it seems to be doing just fine with this one. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Without any further ado, let's dive into fungi, mushrooms, molds, and more. So, for a long time, scientists were like, what the heck are fungi? Because they would look at them and they'd be like, I mean, it's growing out of the ground and it's got these root things, so it's got to be a plant, right? I mean, animals don't grow out of the ground and they don't have roots. But then they were like, but they're not green, they're not photosynthetic, they're not doing photosynthesis, so what the heck is this thing? And they eventually realized that fungi were more closely related to animals. Most of them were heterotrophs and they were decomposers. They ate dead organic matter. They didn't photosynthesize, and so scientists were like, these guys are just weird. And so basically it was kind of the conclusion, the synthesis was that fungi sort of branched off, pun intended, branched off from plants and animals back sort of during a time when plants and animals weren't really, distinct. There wasn't like, plants and animals. And so fungi are sort of an interesting in-between. So they share characteristics of both, and that's going to be part of our exploration today. So, what is a fungus? What is a mushroom? Well, normally when we think about fungi, we think about mushrooms, right? The little things popping out of the ground. But when we look at those guys, actually, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Those things are just what we call the fruiting bodies, the reproductive organs of the fungus. But actually, most of the fungus is underground. It's what you can't see. So this is kind of gross, but fungi are basically made out of giant bundles of these fibers called hyphae. They're basically single-celled tentacles, and they span all through the ground, kind of like roots. I mean, a lot of people mistake them for roots when they see them. But these hyphae form this gigantic bundle called a mycelium underground, and even mushrooms that grow up out of the ground are literally just like spaghetti-like tangles of these teeny mycelium that form into these mushroom shapes that we see. And if you've ever like cooked with mushrooms or like started pulling them apart or something like that, you'll notice that they do have this like fibrous kind of feel, and that's because they're made out of hyphae. So yeah, fungi are actually these ginormous masses of hyphae tentacles, which is really gross and cool to think about, and they can go on for miles underneath the ground. So like a single one of these guys can be pretty big. And that leads us to the world's biggest fungus, actually the largest organism that we know of that's like a single organism living on the face of the earth is a fungus. The world's biggest fungus is actually larger than a blue whale, which is amazing, and it's out in Oregon. It doesn't mean that it's a giant mushroom. A lot of people think it's like a giant skyscraper-sized mushroom, but actually this fungus, like I just said, is mostly underground. It travels underneath this massive forest, and it's just a bunch of hyphae tentacles. That big old mycelium. So here's the structure of the plant cells that make up the hyphae. So when we look at the hyphae, they're made out of cells that are multinucleate, which means that they have more than one nucleus sharing the same cytoplasm. So you can really see that here on the right-hand side. You can see the multinucleate nature of those cells. And they do have cell walls, but the cell walls, unlike in plants, are made out of chitin, which is really weird because chitin is typically an animal protein. I mean, we see it in the shells of crabs and other crustaceans, and so it's kind of interesting to see it incorporated into something that seems intrinsically more plant-like. So this is one of those cool weird mixes. If there are cell walls that are between the nuclei, they're not complete. So you can actually see that the cell walls here have pores that allow for cytoplasm to flow through the entirety of the hyphae. And this allows them to form into a continuous network of connected cells that can pass nutrients back and forth between them. And basically this makes them really, really good at being like a two-way communication system or like a highway. Fungi don't move like animals, obviously, but they do move kind of like plants. So in this way, this is where they're closer to plants. To move, they grow out their hyphae to explore the world around them. Now, if they find resources like good connections or good food, they'll grow the hyphae more in that direction. If they don't find good resources, like food, then they'll grow in a different direction. It's kind of like a slime mold, but what you need to remember is that even though molds, like bread molds and stuff like that, they have mold in the name, a slime mold is terribly named because it's a protist, it's not a fungus. Whereas the molds that we'll talk about today, with their hyphae and everything, these are actual fungi. And the difference is, of course, that these guys are multicellular, right? Even though they can share many nuclei in the same cell, they are multicellular, unlike the protists, and they are, of course, they have nuclei and all this stuff, multinuclei, which I guess protists also have, but they have more advanced organelles and stuff like that. Anyway, they're different than protists. That's all you really need to know. So to move and explore, they use their hyphae. So when you look at a piece of bread that has the bread mold coming off of it, I guess the big takeaway message here is that that bread has actually been moldy for a lot longer than you could see it. The mold that you're seeing, the black or blue stuff on the surface of the bread, that is just the reproductive spore-carrying bodies of the fungus. But that mold was actually growing inside that bread way before that ever happened. So interesting to think about, and a little bit scary. Of course, it's not really super going to harm you, but I wouldn't eat moldy bread, obviously. Okay, so when fungi gain energy, one of the big ways in which they're way more like animals than plants is that they're mostly, well, they're all heterotrophic. So they have to eat other organisms for their energy. They rely mostly on dead organic matter, so they're the main decomposers in the environment, in the ecosystem. They can work in a symbiotic relationship with photosynthetic organisms like trees or like photosynthetic protists when they make lichens. So they can form those mutualistic relationships and rely on organisms that can make food using photosynthesis, but they can't do it themselves. So mostly they just go ahead and break down stuff in the environment. But they're all heterotrophic. That's the important takeaway message there. For reproduction, a lot like protists, fungi can use alternation of generations, which is really useful. So they can switch back and forth between asexual reproduction and just kind of making clones of themselves to grow out their hyphae really fast, and then they can switch, when they're well established, to something like sexual reproduction. And this is pretty great. Bread mold is a great example of this. It'll spread through the bread using asexual reproduction, and then it'll start doing sexual reproduction. Again, what's the reason why you would want to do one over the other? Well, asexual reproduction you can do with way fewer resources. You don't need to find a mate. You can just go ahead and clone yourself. It's very fast generation times. You can expand over a wide area very rapidly. The problem with it is that you are just making clones of yourself, so there's no genetic diversity, and if the environment starts to change, you're not going to be able to handle it, and everyone's going to die. Sexual reproduction takes time. It requires finding a mate, or at the very least, some like the opposite sex, which is interesting to think about in spores because it's a bit more complex than in animals, but typically you have to find a mate or a partner, and then it takes a lot of time and resources, and so you really only want to do this when you're well established. But the advantage is that it's going to give you that genetic diversity that's going to allow you to be able to survive in like an ever-changing environment. So that's pretty important here. So they do both, and it just depends on what conditions that they're facing at that time. Okay, so the bread mold life cycle, as you can see, switches between an asexual and asexual cycle. We start with the spore. The spore will grow up into the massive hyphae called the mycelium. It can make these little sporophytes, these little guys that are going to release the spores, and then they'll continue like this. But they're all clones of each other here in this one. But they can also go ahead and create more advanced sporophytes that can create a male and a female component. Those mate together. They form into sort of a reproductive organ, and then that releases spores that then turn into vegetative mycelium. So it's not like the organism is going to change, but the genetic diversity created by this one is very high, whereas the genetic diversity created by this one is non-existent. So again, it just depends on what cycle you want to use and what conditions you're facing at the time. Fungi are spread all over the world, and there are like tons and tons of species. Over 100,000 have been discovered, and they're basically classed into 4 groups based off of how they store their spores, where they store their spores, and a couple other key features. So we're going to look at the 4 major groups that are Basidiomycota, Ascomycota, Zygomycota, and Chytridomycota. So, Basidiomycota are your classic mushrooms. If you think about, just the little umbrella-shaped guy sticking out of the ground, that's what you should think about when you think about Basidiomycota. They also do include the jelly fungus, so if you've ever seen sort of that weird, gross yellow jelly goo sticking out, or these cool little like cage-like fungi that are coming out of the ground as well, they include all these guys, and basically they just store their sexual spores in these club-shaped cells called basidia, which is where they get their name. So these are your classic mushrooms. Your Ascomycota are sac fungi. I don't know if you guys have ever seen, I've seen some of these growing out. They look like pine cones on stems to me. And then truffles, if you guys have ever heard of like the really fancy cuisine, people will be like, ah yes, this has a truffle sauce. And you're like, what the heck is a truffle sauce? Does that mean chocolate? Because I love chocolate. Chocolate truffles and mushroom truffles are 2 different things. These truffles are like the mushroom truffles, and they're just these little mushrooms that grow in the ground, and they train pigs to go dig them up and find them. And yeah, people eat them. Apparently they taste really good, but usually they're in food way too expensive for me to afford, so, But they also have these cool little cup fungi. So anyway, they store their sexual spores in sac-like structures called the ascus, and they also include yeast as well. Important for bread making. And then we have Zygomycota. So Zygomycota, it says common molds, and I guess if anyone's ever seen a mold, yeah, it's like, ew, yeah, it's kind of what it looks like. But so that kind of fuzzy stuff that's coming out, at the very end, you're going to see that they produce things called zygospores, those little sort of black dots in the end. The zygospores are like super armored spores, if you want to think of it that way. So basically, Zygomycota can survive in extreme conditions. Let's say the environment, takes a turn, they lose all their water, it turns really hot and dry and all that stuff. These guys can just store their spores in the zygospores, and those things are like little armored tanks. They can survive extreme temperatures, extreme cold. They can survive, being stepped on. All this. I mean, it's they're hard to kill, and sadly they include bread mold. So it's really hard to get rid of, and fruit mold, and but they also include really good things like mycorrhizae, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But basically, they connect to plant roots and they connect trees into a giant network. Chytridomycota are the only ones with spores that have flagellated tails like sperm, and you're like, what? Yeah, so interesting fact, they're not the only ones. There are a lot of plants like ferns that have sperm that swim around using tails, and so when it rains and it gets wet, you'll notice that like ferns like to grow where it's wet because the water will carry their little swimming sperm over to the female organs of the ferns and help them to reproduce. It's weird to think that plants have sex, but they do, and it's weird also to think that when it's raining there's a bunch of fern sperm swimming around, but it's also true there's a bunch of fungal sperm swimming around. Yay! So when it rains, these little fungal sperm-like things are going to swim around, and then they're going to, fertilize other fungi, which is pretty cool and gross and weird. But anyway, so they're a bunch of decomposers, and of course, because they're constrained to having their sperm swim, they got to be in a wet environment. They're going to die if it's dry, so they got to live near a lake or in like a swamp or something. So what do fungi do? Again, they are these star decomposers. When you think of decomposers, you probably think of worms and insects and stuff, but fungi are the big ones, and they're going to help to recycle those nutrients like nitrogen and carbon back into the environment. They're really helpful, but there are some that are going to form into parasitic relationships, so it's not all good. Most of them will form mutualistic relationships, such as with lichens or with mycorrhizae. But, of course, like everything, there's always going to be those couple of bad apples in the grape, right? And, of course, they're not, like, inherently evil. They're just trying to survive, but they definitely hurt other organisms when they're doing it. So, some fungi, like corn smut, like you can see in that center photo right there, that's going to, like, totally destroy corn crops, which is bad, not only for the corn, but also for the people that rely on the corn, not only for food, but also for money. So corn smut is a huge problem. Cordyceps is really, really scary, and we're going to learn about it in the extension part of this lesson. But basically, cordyceps is going to colonize or infect pollinators like moths, or they're going to infect ants as well, or spiders, or all sorts of insects. and they're going to take over their bodies and basically grow out of them. It's like a horror movie. You're going to love it. It's awesome. Anyway, so that's really bad. And then, of course, us humans, we also can get colonized by fungi, which is scary. And that's what leads to such wondrous conditions as athlete's foot. That is literally a fungus that's growing through your body with this little hyphae, and it's screwing up your foot and making you be in a lot of pain. So, yay! Of course, these are all parasitic fungi, and they're living off of you, and it hurts you, but it helps them. So, I guess they don't really care. Alright, so back to the good parts of fungi, though. So, I think this is amazing, and I think we talked about this a little bit in class, but Suzanne Simard, British Columbia, the University of British Columbia, has shown that fungi like mycorrhizae actually connects networks of trees and forests like the internet. So basically, it's a two-way communication system that allows trees to talk to each other. They can communicate with their young. They can share resources. If a tree is sick, they'll give that tree food to make sure that that tree is surviving, is going to be okay. They can connect trees across whole acres. Trees that are growing closer to maybe rotting fish in a stream will actually pass those nutrients further back into the forest. There are actually giant trees in the forest that are called emergents or mother trees, as Suzanne Simard calls them, and they act as nodes. And so a lot of trees will send them resources, and then they'll distribute them to trees as they need them. And this just isn't across a single species of tree. This is across multiple species of trees. So basically, the health of a forest is being maintained by this giant network of connections. And when we clear cut forests, which has been a practice that a lot of lumber industries have used for many, many years, when we clear cut forest, we don't just destroy the trees up above, we also destroy the mycorrhizal network below. And so when we destroy that fungal network, we're actually making it so that it's going to be way harder for a healthy forest to grow back there. And so this is one of the big pieces of evidence that we're hoping are going to be able to be used to make regulations on clear cutting and stuff, to make it so that people can't just come and level a forest. They have to do a more conservative approach to make sure that we're keeping that mycorrhizae network and those really important node trees, or those mother trees, intact. Anyway, it's pretty cool to think that trees are constantly communicating and talking with each other, sharing resources to their children, and basically just helping each other out, just like people. It really makes you appreciate that they are also living things with a very complex system of networks and communication, and really they deserve a lot more respect than we give them. Anyway, that's it for fungi. I hope you guys have enjoyed learning about how they interact with both animals and plants, how they're super important for the environment, not only as decomposers, but also as the living internet, and how cool fungi are. Just it's amazing to think that when you see that little mushroom, that might represent a fungi that's bigger than a whale. You just can't see it. Anyway, have a wonderful day. Sorry again about the first try for the audio of this, and I really hope the second one does a lot better. Alright guys, catch you later.